Your boss calls you into their office. You've been transferred to St. Louis. But you live in Boston.
And by the way, could you be there in 6 hours?
You need to pack, find the kids' new schools.
Cancel the internet bill.
What about the car? What about the cat? So many details, and you need to get going now. Welcome to the lives of a traded big leaguer. It always seems smooth. These guys wake up in one uniform, and by game time, they're in another. But behind the scenes, it's a frenzy. So, quick question. What happens when a player gets traded? Trades have been around since the very beginning of baseball. The basic idea? Two teams agree to a deal to swap resources.
And while that mainly means players and money these days, the past definitely has more colorful stories.
Lefty Grove was sold to the Baltimore Orioles for enough money to redo the fence around the plug. Charlie Pride, the country singer and Negro Leagues player, was at one point traded for a team bus.
As long as both sides agree, it's a trade. Trades can rebuild a franchise or curse it for generations. Bring home a championship or restock the minor league system with prospects. And it all starts with the general manager. Each team's GM has the power to negotiate and agree to a trade. Trades can happen anytime in the offseason and anytime during the season, right up until the trade deadline.
Last-minute deal.
Which is pretty self-explanatory. And GMs are always on the hunt for a steal. During the 1975 winter meetings, legendary White Sox owner Bill Veeck and his GM literally sat in the hotel lobby with an open for business sign. And they actually made a handful of trades right there. Today, the trade process has actually evolved more than you might imagine. Pretty crazy to think your favorite player was acquired with a GIF. The closer to the trade deadline, the more frantic the deal-making can be. Some of the most important trades in MLB history were buzzer beaters. Manny Ramirez was traded to the Dodgers in 2008, just minutes before the deadline.
Can't even tell you how many trades I've made. Made a trade for Jeff Conine. We ended up negotiating as they were flying because we had to get all of this done by midnight at the trade deadline. And he was a huge part of that championship team in 03.
Conine swings in the first pitch. A home run for Jeff Conine!
To make it official, the front offices submit paperwork to file the trade with the league, which is exactly why one of the most famous non-trades in history stayed a non-trade. Rumor has it that the Yankees and Red Sox owners, fueled by hearty amounts of liquid courage, agreed to trade franchise icons Joe DiMaggio for Ted Williams. The cold light of morning washed that idea down the drain before any paperwork was filed, but the legend has lived on for decades. All right, so the trade is official. Now it's time to turn some lives upside down. Someone has to tell the player, and hopefully before he finds out from the media. For most players, if you're traded, you gotta pack your bags. But some players negotiate no trade clauses into their contracts.
Giancarlo Stanton trade was very interesting because he had a no trade clause. I ended up trading him 3 times. I had deals in place to St. Louis and to San Francisco, and he chose not to go to either of those places.
Some players single out teams they will not move to, and some veteran players qualify for automatic no-trade privileges. But for most players, wait, what was it? Roll the tape back. So now that you found out you're traded, and it's actually happening, what happens next? If it's the off-season, you've got time to get your affairs in order. But if it's during the season, buckle up, Buttercup.
30 minutes before a game in St. Louis, they take me out of the lineup. They're like, you're out of the lineup, you're about to be traded. They didn't tell me where, they didn't tell me anything. And I don't know, it just shook me emotionally because I'd been with the Astros for like 8 years. This is like most of my adult life.
As soon as a player's traded, the new team takes full responsibility for them. One of the first calls the player's going to get is from the new team's traveling secretary. No, not him. Players technically have 3 days to report, but they're pretty much expected the next day, if not that same night. When Chase Headley was traded by San Diego to the Yankees in the morning, he arrived mid-game and ended up with the winning hit that night.
Chase Headley gets the game-winning hit in his first game as a Yankee.
So the commute might involve a first-class flight cross-country, or You could just be moving from one dugout to another, and your teammates 1 minute could be your opponents the next. Next, the new team's on the hook for a full week at a hotel if the player needs it, and they're responsible for getting the player's car shipped over. But while the club's doing all that, the player's got quite a bit on his plate too. Those 7 days in a hotel are all the club is required to provide. So tick-tock on finding a new place to crash.
Everyone says this, do not buy a home. I know Mark Melanson, who were up and coming, he's like, all right, I'm buying a house in Houston. And literally that off season, right after he bought his house, got traded.
Agents also often help in the process, particularly for international players who may not know all the nitty-gritty that needs to get taken care of. And there is nitty-gritty.
It's a lot harder on the wives and the families than it is the player, because the player just goes and everyone caters to you a little bit. Thank you to the families and the wives and the people behind the scenes, the traveling secretaries, because they put in most of the work and they make it really easy on us players.
The wives are the backbone of the trade because the guys just go. They're needed on their new team. My husband, Jake Diekman, is a left-handed reliever. He was traded from Philly to Texas to Arizona Diamondbacks, from the Kansas City Royals to the Oakland Athletics. Once you get traded once, you kind of understand how it works. So when we know that he's in the mix, I just kind of start getting my ducks in a row. You don't realize you've got all your bills, you've got to call your landlord and somehow get out of your lease or pass it on to the new team for them to help you get out of it. Definitely, I have it down to a science, I feel like.
If you get traded in the middle of a contract, you're going to be there a while. But a lot of players get dealt at the trade deadline of their contract year. It's a way for teams to wring one last ounce of value out of a star player before losing them. For some players, it means their relocation might only be temporary, a few months tops, barely enough to properly unpack. Then they'll have to do the whole thing over again when they sign with the new team.
We've shed tears over being traded, and it's a lot, but it's an honor. And I think if you keep that at the forefront, it kind of helps you get through it a little bit.
More so than anything else, trades are unpredictable. Trades can transform a team or seal its fate. They can uproot players' lives in an instant, or help them sort out their future. They can happen almost any time, in almost any way, and include pretty much anything, as long as both sides agree. So GMs, players, fans, step right up to the trade roulette wheel and spin your fate. You never know where it might land.